Hello everyone, this is Carrie O'Shea-Gordon with MarketingProfs. Welcome to today's seminar. Before we get started, I'd like to thank NetProspects for sponsoring today's seminar. NetProspects helps marketing and sales organizations optimize their revenue impact by increasing the quality and effectiveness of their marketing data management practices. Thousands of B2B organizations rely on NetProspects to assess, cleanse, enrich, and grow their marketing data in order to fuel high-performing marketing campaigns. If you're on Twitter, be sure to add the hashtag B2BData, that's B2BData, to your webinar-related tweets during or after this broadcast. Today's seminar is the State of B2B Marketing Data for 2014, and our presenters are John Donlin and Derek Slayton. John thrives on helping organizations accelerate the maturity of their business operations. He has more than 20 years of experience in marketing operations as both a practitioner and consultant. Before joining SiriusDecisions, John was the Director of Sales Process and Technology for Iron Mountain, where he pioneered the use of Lean Six Sigma process improvement techniques. Derek is a B2B marketer and a product guy with over 20 years' experience in technology, sales, and marketing. As CMO at NetProspects, his role is to align the company's product roadmap with its go-to-market engine and create relationships with other B2B marketers. Okay, let's get started. John and Derek, please take it away.
Okay, thanks, Carrie. Appreciate the intro there. This is Derek Slayton, so you can associate a voice with a name from NetProspects. And I'd like to thank Carrie and the folks at MarketingProfs for working with us on bringing this information to you guys out there in the internet world. I'd like to say good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. I know we have close to 1,000 people joining us today, so it's great to see such a large audience of people that are so interested in what's going on with the state of marketing data. And lastly, I'd like to thank John Donlin for joining me here on the presentation today. I know the folks at SiriusDecisions, who are great partners of ours, have been doing a lot of research on this subject matter and have a lot to say about it, so I'm certainly looking forward to hearing from him as to how what we've learned from our research applies to the way that they see the market at SiriusDecisions. But before we get to John, I've got a little bit to say as well. Quickly from an agenda standpoint, we'll do a little bit of setup on our report, our methodology as to how we gather this information around the state of B2B marketing data. John will go over some thoughts, as I mentioned, on what they see at Sirius and how that maps into what we saw in the report, and then we'll talk about some of the details from the report, some of the findings from our year-long analysis of the state of marketing data. And get into some next steps for you out there on the phone to think about as you apply this to your own companies and your own practices. But as you probably know, we're here to talk about marketing data because, frankly, we at NetProspects are obsessed with it. And to carry the visual analogy a little further, what we've learned is that if you don't take care of that acorn, it goes bad pretty quickly. So, we've spent a lot of time thinking about how we apply our solutions to that problem. And I'll be direct here. I'm not going to cut corners. I'm here to sell you something. It's not necessarily our solution, although that may occur, and I'd certainly be happy if it did. But it's really around a belief that as a B2B marketer, if you do a better job of managing your marketing data and your marketing database, you'll be a better marketer, both at the tactical demand gen, lead nurturing, lead qualification level, and at the strategic level inside your company. I've seen it throughout my career. I'm certainly seeing it here at NetProspects and with the customers we work at managing their data with. The folks that take the time and spend the resources, both internally and with budget, to make their marketing data that much better, have better success with their marketing programs. And it seems like an obvious point, but I can tell you from what we saw from the report, that's not always the case in a lot of companies. And the reason we're really obsessed with marketing data is because we feel like marketing is changing. The approach to marketing is changing. And while we're going to uncover a few tidbits of knowledge from our report with you folks today, I don't think one of those things is that Anne Hanley is actually the descendant of Abraham Lincoln, but I'm not entirely sure that isn't the case. But I really think that as a guy who just came back from the Marketo conference, where there was a lot of talk about what's going on in the innovation nation and how marketing is kind of stepping into the heart of the strategic nature of most organizations. I think that actually is occurring across the industry. I think marketing really shouldn't be viewed as just an MQL, a marketing qualified lead machine. I think marketing is becoming certainly a player, and maybe even in some companies the strategic driver of how that company chooses to go to market and what types of strategies it puts in place to go to market. And there's a quote from Peter Drucker that I think really rings true with respect to this, and that's that great companies really focus on doing two things well. One is innovation, right? Coming up with innovative ways to solve big problems for customers. And the second one is marketing, and that's really the act of connecting with the people who have those problems and communicating that you have a solution to them that works better than the solution they already have or one they might not have thought of. And I think that second point, marketing, is really coming into its own as the industry has changed and as technology becomes increasingly part of the picture. I think there's a number of things going on in this arena. I think Scott Brinker, also known as Chief Martech, covers this really well. He has a fantastic ebook that's a great resource for those of you that are interested in learning more about that subject, that covers what's happening with marketing and how it's changing from a technology standpoint and what that means for marketers. From my standpoint, I think the buyer journey is a big piece, and marketing's expanding role in carrying the ball further down the field. That's certainly something to think of. But also some other stuff with it, which I know John will talk about a bit in his section as well, around market analysis and market intelligence, and being really specific about understanding what companies you want to do business with, and emphasize your go-to-market plan to get in touch with and communicate to those companies. And then the last piece, I think, is automation. I think, obviously coming off of the Marketo conference, where marketing automation was really the center of the universe, that's becoming the case in a lot of marketing organizations, most marketing organizations, I think, today. And all of these things, as the slide kind of indicates, heavily leverage data. And a great database can be the key to success across leveraging these new technologies in a meaningful way. And as I mentioned, we see that here at NetProspects every day with the customers we work with and the challenges we work with, helping them solve. And really, when I look at what our role is in kind of helping uncover some of these insights around what the state of marketing data is today, our role at NetProspects is really, we've been cutting our teeth on this data challenge for over 6 years. We've built a data factory, if you will, that sources B2B data on companies and buying centers inside those companies and the people that reside inside those buying centers. Around that multi-source model, we've built what I would call a very rigorous process to kind of stitch together these contact records and attach them to the companies they should be a part of, and put intelligence around that company information, whether it's industry or size or revenue, or even installed software and hardware technology they may have in their environments. And that making sure that those records are not only assembled, but they're fully complete and that they're actionable. And then alongside that, a cleansing and management mechanism that continuously maintains the quality of that database. And that's where we've really, frankly, learned a lot over the last half decade. And in the last year and a half, we've focused more and more of our time in helping customers use that process for the data that they already have. So really, our goal and our role in this ecosystem is to provide our learnings in a pluggable API in a way that maps into the marketing automation solutions that all of you probably already have deployed or are deploying in your environments, and allow for our data management best practices to be leverageable by the data that you have in your database today and the data that you're collecting every day through web forums and trade shows and opt-in programs and whatever other marketing channels you may have employed at your organization. And that's really what we do at NetProspects. And the first piece of kind of productizing that was to build out a service that allowed marketers like yourself to quickly get a view of their data in a way that was not only quick but easy and secure. And that's what we built with our data health scan. And when we run a data health scan, or I should say our customers use our technology to run a data health scan for themselves, we give them a quick snapshot of what their data looks like from a quality, completeness, and an overall profile picture. that helps them make smart decisions about what they would do with their data strategy. But it also allowed us to collect a whole lot of information in the aggregate, frankly, about what's going on with B2B marketing data. As a company that sits at the center of that analysis piece, we were able to collect and analyze those results over the course of a year. And last year, we launched our first benchmark report, which unveiled the aggregate results of this marketing data that we were able to collect and analyze. And we saw great response from this report last year. We were frankly shocked at how much interest there was around the subject matter, and it was very clear to us that this was a subject that required ongoing attention and continual sharing with the greater community. And I'm pleased to announce on the webinar today, as you probably inferred from the title and the lead-up invitations and such, that available today is the 2014 version of the State of Marketing data in the B2B space. And all of you, as participants on the webinar, will receive a copy of the report in your inboxes after today's webinar is complete. And we'd encourage you to share it, obviously read it and interpret it, and ask questions if you have them. We'd be glad to have deeper discussions on it. It's something we take a lot of pride in, and we'd love to hear your feedback on as you get into it. So we're looking forward to diving into some of the details from that report later in today's proceedings. From a quick view, some of the statistics around the report, we collected files from hundreds of companies. There were thousands of files that were submitted through our data health scan, and in total we analyzed over 61 million records, which is significantly up from last year for a couple of reasons. Number one, last year when we did it, we really had only been running the data health scan service for 4 or 5 months at that point. So this year we had a full annualized view of data across the year. We also saw marketers coming back multiple times to scan and analyze different segments of their database or their database in total, again, periodically through the year, because as we all know, the database changes regularly and things age in and age out. And lastly, I think the other driver of the size increase was that larger files were being submitted. We worked with a lot of large companies that put a large amount of records through our data health scan. One of the unique things about the technology is that it can run through hundreds of thousands of records in a matter of minutes. So as marketers started to see that, they came back with more and more of their data, frankly, to get an understanding of how they stacked up, not only against what they thought their database should look like, but against some of their peers as we were sharing the results from a percentage basis and aggregate through the data health scan user interface. Our report methodology was just that, to take our customers or our prospects database through the data health scan and run it through our reference database of known good and known bad companies and contacts, and then to assess that data across 4 key areas of competence. One is phone connectability, second is record duplication, email deliverability, and record completeness. And as we did that, we also mapped those 4 key best practice areas into a health scale, as we called it, which identified on a record and file basis where those records and files sat on a sliding scale from 1 to 5, where 1 is the worst and the most risky, and 5 is optimal. And the aggregate results of those reports that we collected over the course of last year are what we share in the report today and at the seminar, webinar today, as we'll get into later. But before we do that, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't step back and say, well, what does this all mean to us, myself included, as a B2B marketer, and how should we think about this as we internalize some of these results and think about how we might stack up against them? And I think the best way to kind of get a broader context is to have folks like John at SiriusDecisions kind of give us the lay of the land in terms of what they're seeing, being out there working with companies of all sizes across all industries, struggling with some of the same challenges with respect to marketing and data management. So with that, I'd like to introduce and turn it over to my colleague John and have him share some of the thoughts from the SiriusDecisions side on what they're seeing out in the market today.
Yeah. tuning in. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to listen to this topic. The data management space, I think, is a really interesting one. It's one that I personally spend a lot of time thinking about here at Sirius, and a lot of time speaking with our clients in terms of their challenges and how they're approaching their data management efforts. So I think this is a great topic to get a bunch of people together and talk about what some of the best practices are. So, when we talk to our clients, one of the big themes that comes through is, wow, there is just so much data out there. I don't even know where to begin to start cleaning it up. I'm hearing these rumblings around the company that our data stinks, but where do I begin? And so we probed on that question a little bit. We thought about it a little bit. We talked to a lot of clients. And what came to the front was that having a clean database in and of itself is not the end game. You want to have great data so that you can enable the different sales and marketing processes that you're trying to execute against. So we thought, all right, so let's try and figure out what are those key activities that we do as sales and marketing professionals that are really reliant on data, that are data intensive. And we came up with 6 processes that are really, really key for having good quality data. The first one is market intelligence, which Derek mentioned before, and this kind of splits into a couple of different pieces. One is from a macro perspective. You want to do some white space analysis, find out what your market opportunity is. And then on a smaller level, it gets into things like segmenting and understanding the personas that you have and don't have, how you're going to do effective targeting against either those personas or the companies, all in support of your go-to-market strategy, whatever your demand strategy is. You need to be able to do effective segmenting to be able to go to market with that. The second is inbound personalization. This splits into a couple of different areas as well. So it could be shortening forms or pre-populating forms on your website as people come to you. It can also be customizing the content that they see when they come to your site. So there are tools out there that will let you customize the content in terms of their industry or even their company or the specific person if you can identify them down to that level. Certainly lead scoring and lead routing are a couple of key areas that are reliant on data. You can have the best scoring algorithm in the world, but if you've got bad data feeding into it, you're not going to get the proper scores, and you're going to be mischaracterizing your lead levels on the back end. And lead routing is the same thing. So a lot of clients that we talk to have really robust routing rules and robust routing routines in place where different leads might go to different places based on geographies or industries, or more mature organizations tend to go to a named account strategy. So certain reps get leads for certain accounts, and if you have bad data flowing in, the leads aren't going to go to the right people, or they're going to end up in a miscellaneous bucket. They're going to have to get rerouted, or you have kind of a generalist picking up the phone and making that first call to the prospect. And the whole thing just kind of results in a bad customer experience. So it's really central. Good data is really central to good lead routing. And then when we look at outbound outreach, this is a couple of things as well. So the world is sort of turned on its head now, and it's in some ways it's kind of an inbound world, and it's about content production. But outbound email outreach has not gone away, so it's important that you've got good data to be able to support that. In addition to the data that you need for sales reps. When they first pick up the phone and make that first contact, you don't want them picking up the phone and saying, "Hi, Mr. Smith, I understand you're the data center manager in Minneapolis, and it's Mr. Jones, and they're in HR, and they're in Austin, Texas." So, they need proper and correct data to be able to make an informed and confident first phone call, and that really can't be underestimated. And then lastly, as you might imagine, data supports reporting and analytics. So you really need to be able to measure your effectiveness in everything that you're doing. From a more strategic level, being able to report on the good things that marketing is doing and showing its value is going to lead to more investment for marketing. And then on a more tactical, practical level, you need to understand what's working and what's not working. And if you don't have the data to be able to look at that and run those analytics, then you're not going to understand how well you're doing and how you can improve. And by the way, the whole idea of predictive analytics, forget it. If you don't have good data, then that's a pipe dream. So these are the 6 areas that we find that are really data intensive, and we found this is a good construct that our clients are using as a way to bring clarity to their data management activities and to help them prioritize as well. So they can look at these and say, okay, well, which one of these is more important to me, and then I'll look at the data that supports that and try and bolster that data. But one of the interesting things is when you take a look at this is that contact data really cuts across almost everything that you're doing here. And it's so key to everything that we do in sales and marketing, and it's so key to segmentation and driving that demand strategy and that go-to-market strategy. So, contact data kind of sits at the core of all of this. So if those are the things that, that data supports, then the next question we tend to get is, well, how do I go about fixing my data? It's broken. I'm hearing these, again, these rumblings that the data is broken. I've looked at the database myself. I can see where there are holes. How do I start to assess how good or bad my data is? And so we've got a couple of constructs I'm going to run through on the next couple of slides. One is to break it out in terms of quality and coverage. So you want to look at your data quality. So take any given field, for example. Is it complete? Does it have a value in there or not? Is that value valid? So you might have first name, last name. It's filled in with Mickey Mouse, but that's probably not a valid value. Or you might have letters and special characters in your phone number field, that sort of thing. And then the third dimension of that is whether the data is fresh. So you might have complete data. It might be fairly valid, but if in terms of from a technical perspective, but if it's old and it's stale, it's probably not good. People move around, they change jobs within the company, they change companies. So there's an aspect of freshness that you need to use to evaluate the quality of your data. And then the second major dimension is coverage. So so for a given record, we might have good quality data, but how many of those records do we have that we care about? So of the buyer personas that we're targeting, how many of those do we have? And a little bit more broadly of the accounts that we're targeting, what's our coverage there? And then the segments, the industries or the company size segments, how well are we covered from that perspective? So there's a couple of different ways that you can start to break down the quality of your contact data. And another construct that we recommend people use, and you saw this briefly on the data health scan that Derek showed you, is to tier your records in terms of completeness, and to tier them on a scale of unreachable to complete. And so, down at the unreachable level, you've got data that really you can't use for any kind of outreach. The email doesn't work, or you've got a phone number, but it's not a great one because it's not a direct dial, or the data is really stale. That, records in that class are, essentially unreachable. Then you move up to where you've got a minimum amount of data. So maybe you've got an email address. You can do some outbound communication, but that might be about it. And you really don't have any kind of ancillary information about the contact besides just contact information, just a phone number or email. But then as you start to fill that data in a little bit better, now you've got basic and complete. So in the basic level, now you've got a little bit more information about them. You've got information about their industry, their title, their company. In the complete arena, now you've got you can tie who that person is back to the personas that you may have developed. You might have multiple ways of being able to contact them. So you've got phone number, email address, maybe you've got a Twitter handle, that sort of thing. And I think when you look at the Net Prospects tiering, they use a slightly different set of names. But the point is, it doesn't really matter what names you use or what definitions you have kind of for each tier. The point is to separate them so that you can understand which data is usable and which data is not. And as a rule of thumb, the data that you have in your basic and your complete tiers are the ones that you can confidently do outreach in. And the ones that are in unreachable and minimum, those are the ones that are good candidates for cleansing and appending.
Yeah, John, I think it's interesting. I think you're right on. It's more about the process than the terminology. And I also think on your prior slide, the discrepancy between most marketers, I think about quality a lot, and they think about coverage. And when they think, what we experience when they think about coverage, it's more about, I'm running this program. Do I have the data to support this program? Yep. And what we really help a lot of people understand is how well does my data in total support my go-to-market strategy, and do I have the right go-to-market strategy, or do I have the wrong data, or do I, how do I make sure those two things align? So I think it, from what I hear from you, it sounds like there's a couple different dimensions that folks need to look at this on, and most importantly, they don't need to overthink the terminology. They just need to focus on having a fairly regular process by which to go through it.
Yep. Yeah, that's absolutely right. And it's really a more strategic consideration that comes out usually at the annual planning process when you start to think about who are the personas that we're targeting, what's our go-to-market strategy, what's our demand strategy, and then, okay, what data do we need to support that? Rather than, as you said, you're at the tactical campaign level, okay, I got to try and hit 500 people with this one campaign. How do I get the right names? It's got to be more strategic than that. Yep.
I mean, I think both are important, obviously, but I think in a lot of cases, marketers don't have the time to do the primary one, which is the strategic piece. In a lot of cases, they don't do it because they don't have the data analysis available. It's very hard to do. So totally agree.
Yep. So the last dimension that we would add in here is that idea of freshness or recency. So you can see on the y-axis here, we've got that tiering strata broken out. So you've got complete, basic, minimum, and unreachable. And then in this, we add in the idea of recency, or how active those contacts have been in the last 12 months. And actually, we use bands of within the last 12 months, 12 to 36 months, and then beyond 36 months. And we do that because our research has found that a typical contact database, about a quarter to a third of the data in it will go stale in a year's time, so in just 12 months. And so that's how we arrived at drawing these bands. And what you can see is, you've got that data that's unreachable, so that's declared inactive right off the bat. The data that's too old, greater than 36 months old, that also is kind of out of bounds. And then the rest of it, you can really start to dissect and understand the level of completeness and recency that you have for your data. And what we're recommending is really just the data that's in the top two rows there and pushed off to the right. That's the data that you can count when you're doing things like a reverse waterfall analysis. So for those who aren't familiar, what a planning construct is, you're handed a number at the beginning of the year and you say, okay, you got to drive $1 million worth of revenue. And you can back that up by saying, okay, I got to do $1 million. That means X number of deals at a certain average deal size. That means I've got to generate so many opportunities, which backs into so many leads, and ultimately so many contacts that I need to reach out to. And when you start to do that analysis, you can say, okay, well, I got to hit, just pick a number, say it's 100,000 contacts to get to that number. Well, now let's look at our database and see how many of those 100,000 we already have. And this is a great way of breaking this out and letting you know how many you have and then how many you're going to have to acquire another way, whether that's through inbound or through data acquisition, like buying or renting a list, that sort of thing. So, the question we get also is, why does all this matter? And I'll be the first one to raise my hand and say, data is not sexy. If you're at a cocktail party and you start talking about data, people aren't going to crowd around you. They're not going to start buying you drinks. It's not a sexy topic. But what we've seen in our research is that companies that follow best practices around data management, and by that I mean running some sort of health check like the data health scan that NetProspects does, doing ongoing cleansing and appending, deduping, tiering those records so that you can understand if you've got the right records to back up your demand strategy. If you can integrate fields into your database that reflect your target personas and where they are in the buyer's journey, all of that, if you can do most of those things, then you're going to see a bump. We've seen clients have a bump of 66% in their demand creation activities, which I will go out on a limb and say that is a sexy number. So, data really does matter. It's the foundation for the different sales and marketing processes that we do. And more we're starting to see people understand that and really leverage good data to drive better demand creation.
It's interesting, John. I mean, I think it's great to hear you say that. I know we've been following that research for a while now here at NetProspects, obviously. One of the things we encounter with our internal champions when we're talking to them about how we can address some of their database challenges and make them better marketers as a result, is that they can run into challenges selling it into their organization. It's often, as you put, a non-sexy topic, although it might get you to a sexy number if people can understand it. But the act of selling it in and prioritizing it over all the other things that marketing typically has on its plate, inclusive of technology adoption and events and sales enablement, as well as inbound net new lead collection. Is that something you experience? Do you see folks addressing that well? How do they get around some of those internal challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a tough one. I mean, data management or maintaining the database is, it's kind of considered a run rate activity. And frankly, it's hard to prove out the ROI on it. I mean, it's there, but it's difficult to get under the numbers and make the business case for it for a leadership team. But one of the things that helps is if you can point to external benchmarks and say, okay, what does good look like? Here's where we are. We've done all this analysis of our database. What does good look like? What should we be striving for? What should we be aspiring to? Where do we sit with against our peers or against the rest of the industry? So so that's one thing that helps, and I think that's what's great about the the benchmark survey is that it gives people kind of an anchor to let them know and understand kind of their where they stand against everybody else.
Agreed. I mean, I think that's what we see with our customers, and we've certainly worked with a number of them as to how to quantify some of their results. But having a first-pass benchmark and then a first-pass what's my current state internally is certainly helpful on understanding the benefits you might see and the improvements you might get. So that's a good segue, I guess, back into the thing which we were kind of here to unveil, if you will. Not that it's like the next generation Corvette or anything. But it is, we think it's pretty important, and certainly from what we found in our benchmark study, pretty interesting, if not shocking to some extent, as to what we found when we looked at the results in aggregate. So just to share with the audience a couple of key data points, and then we can have more of a discussion and get into some Q&A in a few minutes here. But when we looked across those 4 key areas that I kind of announced before John got into his content, from a record completion standpoint, almost 90% of the records that we saw were incomplete. Missing critical fields like industry or revenue, employee, phone, other pieces of information, and on a scale basis, it scored at a 2.7, which was up from a 2.5 from last year. But if you look at the firmographic fields alone, and I got a chart on this in the next slide, the score there was only 1.6. So again, to reorient you, 5 is good, 1 is bad. In aggregate, we're at 2.7, which is median and not all that great. But the firmographic stuff, which is really super critical for being smart marketers about targeting, segmentation, and delivering the right message or passing the right lead, as John mentioned, to the right salesperson, it's missing in almost 9 out of 10 records. Another interesting stat for me was that on the positive side, as an industry, we seem to be solving for the duplicate problem. And I think from our perspective, marketing automation is certainly helping with this. A lot of those tools have built-in dedupe capabilities. They're not necessarily dedupe capabilities, but they won't even let you introduce a dupe at the email level because they've recognized that becomes a huge problem in terms of proliferating buyer journey insights across multiple records for the same person. So in the aggregate, again, we saw this scored very highly this year, even higher than it did last year, and it was high last year. So as an industry, we're definitely doing better there. So a little bit of good news. On the phone side, and John, you touched on this a bit as well, the average score was 3.4 on the scale, but more than 3 in 5 records did not have a phone number. And that's a huge issue when it comes to the conversion process of moving a lead from marketing to sales. And I know, John, you touched on that a bit. I also think, at the productivity level, it certainly is impactful, as you mentioned. And I also think at the meta level, it's very impactful in terms of the relationship that marketing has with sales. And I know we're all always working on that. I can't go to a marketing conference where sales and marketing alignment isn't like topics 1, 2, and 3 on a 2-topic list. And not having a phone number for the salesperson to reach out to when you give them a lead it can be a problem when it comes to building that relationship in a way that you want to. And then lastly, from an email deliverability standpoint, 35% of the files analyzed were classified as functional or higher from an email deliverability standpoint. It was up to 3.1 from 2.8 last year on a score level, but it's still not really where it should be. There's a number of risks to having emails and costs to having emails in your database that aren't deliverable. And by not deliverable, I mean it actually will not deliver to that address. Number of your maybe some of the ability to get box for the email. Also associated with marketing automation platform itself.
Hi, Derek. I'm sorry. It sounds as though we're losing you on the audio a little bit there. Maybe John could weigh in.
Yeah, why don't we see if we can give Derek a second to reset and then it up a little bit. Sounds like
Great. In the meantime, we've had someone ask if you could, actually a couple of people asked if you could explain the concept of the reverse waterfall a little bit more, maybe just before you move too far afield from it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so the idea of the reverse waterfall starts with the demand waterfall, and that is the idea that you start off with a large number of contacts as you reach out to them, and they become hand raisers. Those flow into leads, early stage leads of inquiries, and ultimately marketing qualified leads that you would then pass off to sales. Sales then does their job to qualify those leads and verify that it meets all the criteria that marketing has said it would have when it passes over a lead, and then does the initial outreach, and those eventually turn into opportunities and hopefully close deals. And so the idea of the reverse waterfall is it's a planning mechanism. We actually have a tool that can help you work through this. On an annual basis, usually it's used. Like I said, you would have a dollar target that you would chase. And so it's just basically a way of calculating in reverse all the way back up through the waterfall the number of closed deals that you would need, the number of opportunities, the number of leads, and ultimately the number of contacts, so that it gives you a sense of how you might be able to plan your budget for the year. And it also helps you calibrate in terms of, if I'm being asked to drive $1 million and that says I need 100,000 contacts, but we only have 3 in our database, well, it's going to cost me a ton of money to try and acquire those contacts, so guess what? I need more money. So so it's a planning tool. It's a way of taking the waterfall and based on your conversion rates, kind of reversing all of that so that you can do some good planning at the beginning of the year. And anybody who has any other follow-up questions on that, I'd be happy to. Please feel free to email me afterwards, and it's something we can talk through in more depth.
Great. Thanks so much. I think we have Derek back with us.
I should be back. Hopefully you guys can hear me. I apologize for the audio snafu there, but hopefully things are sounding good. And I appreciate, John, you coming to my aid there in a time of need.
Yeah, no problem.
So I know we only got a few more minutes, and I want to get to the Q&A because I know we've got a couple queued up that are obviously important to you folks out there and going to be interesting to dive into. I'll move on from this slide because I imagine you got the gist of it. I think we talked a lot about the state of segmentation and the fact that segmentability, which isn't actually a word, but I think folks know what I mean, is critical to doing the right things and doing the smart things as marketers in terms of getting the lead to the right person and getting the right message to the right contact and having the right context for that message. And when you look at the record level, inside the fields for those records, industry revenue and employee size are just not there for today's B2B marketing databases that we analyze. And that's a real problem to take advantage of all the tools that are now available to us as marketers. Without that level of data detail, it's impossible, if not very, very difficult to do. And to use the Monty Python analogy, it really is the holy grail for most marketers is to deliver the right message to the right contact with the right context at the right time. And as we've kind of talked a lot about today, frankly, the robustness and accuracy of the marketing database is really the linchpin to making that all work effectively. This is actually a SiriusDecisions slide, so I'm presenting it back to a SiriusDecisions analyst, which is probably in breach of contract. But I think John touched a lot on the completeness and frankly prioritizing the work that you're going to do. So pick the data that you care the most about and assign the priority that you want to assign to the fields that you need the most based on how you go to market. And then I think the other two points are really where we come in at Prospect. This is what we've built. We built our business around, and I would equate it to the difference between building an electricity plant in your backyard versus plugging in to the outlet that's running to your house. There are companies out there like us that have, built great processes around managing, validating, maintaining, and enriching B2B marketing data, and to do it regularly. And we actually feel like in order to do that effectively, it has to be a part of the subsystem, a part of the marketing automation platform that you're utilizing, and that's how we've focused on building out our solutions. And we'd obviously love to help you. And to that last point, to quote one of my favorite shows, look, it's not a one and done task. You have to do this stuff religiously, as John mentioned. A quarter to a third of your records go bad every year. We see that similarly. We always equate 2% per month here at NetProspects. We manage almost 300 million records on a continuous basis, 50 million known good and 250 million known bad records. So we certainly understand the rate of decay, let's just say, for data in the aggregate. And we see folks that do it and then don't do it for a long period of time are kind of reset back to zero when they realize they have to do it again. So it's better to stay healthy than to have to deal with the disease, to use probably an overused analogy, but that's really how we see it here at NetProspects. And obviously, again, as we touched on a lot, our customers are seeing great benefits from going through this process in a cyclical fashion. Not only to understand where they are today, but to, like I said, keep that database continuously up to snuff so they can deliver the results that we're all held to account for. And then, to the strategic discussion, the last point is identifying where you've got gaps in your go-to-market, gaps in your coverage plan, gaps in your data to support that. And I think as strategic marketers, those are the types of conversations that put you in a much better position at the executive table when you're able to bring that kind of data on up the food chain, so to speak, and have those kinds of conversations. So that's a little bit of an advertisement for what we do here at NetProspects, but hopefully it hasn't been too much promotional on top of the content. The last piece I'll say is, look, if you haven't done a data health scan yet, you should. You're kind of crazy if you haven't. Number one, it's the way that we're able to aggregate up these results and share them back with you as an industry as to where we are with the state of B2B marketing data. And number two, you're just going to get a bunch of great insights in a fairly short time period about the data that you have today, and it comes at no cost. You can extract it directly out of your Marketo or Eloqua instances in a click of a button. You can have your results back in under 5 or 10 minutes. So as a last piece of promotional ask, I would encourage you all out there to take a minute and go and see what your data looks like, so you can think more intelligently, more accurately about what the steps you might take from here to get to where you want to be. And this is our belief here at NetProspects. We're not ashamed to say it. We believe that great marketing starts with great data. And I'll thank everybody for attending the conversation today. I apologize for the brief audio glitch. John, thanks for spending some time with me here today. And I'm looking forward to getting into some of the questions. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the folks at MarketingProfs and Karen.
Thanks very much, John and Derek. That was great information, and a lot of it. Everyone at Prospects will send a link to that ebook Derek mentioned with the follow-up email, so keep an eye on your inbox. We do have just a minute or so to take some questions from the audience, and I want to make sure that we do. So here's the first, what if we have a database that has a minimum basic completeness level? What are the best methods to increase the data completeness? And which departments should be involved with that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. It's one we get a lot too. So what you want to look at is there are a number of cleanse and append services. Certainly NetProspects has one that can bolster the completeness of the data. In terms of who should be involved, I personally tend to take a process perspective on these things, and from a process discipline, you look at who the customer of the process is and who's going to be using this data. So I would go right to the users of the data. Derek was talking about, he sort of reiterated the importance of, that salesperson picking up the phone, and if they don't have good data, then they're sort of nowhere. Well, they're the customer of that process, and I think sometimes marketing can kind of get wrapped up in thinking it knows what sales wants and not checking in with them regularly enough. So when you're looking at who should get involved, look at who the users of that data are and reach out to them to understand what quality looks like, what good looks like, and then that will inform you in terms of how you may need to fix the fields that you do have or expand into fields that you don't yet have and get good quality data there.
Great, thanks. Another similar question, really. When you hear the data from unreachable to complete, how can companies address data in unreachable and minimum categories? Can it really be improved, or is it best to purge it from the database? Cleanse and append.
Yep. Yeah. So I've got some thoughts there, but Derek, I'll let you weigh in on this if you'd like, and then I can add my thoughts as well. Maybe we've lost Derek. So I'll start off then. So it's kind of a judgment call in terms of the unreachables, what you want to do with it. We don't have any hard and fast rules.
I'm still here, guys.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay, great. In terms
So,
of what you want to do.
good, because apparently he doesn't have any rules. We need some rules.
Yeah, it's in terms of the unreachable ones, it's a judgment call. A lot of times you may not have great contact information for those records, but they may be tied into other back-end systems like billing or customer care. And if you've got a key that you can tie those together, they may be worth saving because you may be able to augment the data in those later. And certainly the ones that hit minimum, those are within reach and worth cleaning up.
And how do you align your data with your go-to-market strategy? What type of process do you recommend for that?
Yeah, so that's another good question, and we get questions about this from folks in marketing ops and coming at it from a database perspective and say, okay, we need a database strategy. What are we going to do to leverage our database to enhance our our demand creation? And really, it works the other way. It starts with the demand managers and the folks on the business and the marketing side of things saying, here's how we think the best ways are that we're going to be able to drive demand. And then you look at, okay, what's the data that we're going to need to support that? So certainly you want robust contact information. Do you need information about trigger events that are important to your personas, or things that other things that might be important to them that will tip you off in terms of where they might be in the buyer's journey and how far along they are. So it starts with marketing, and it starts with the demand managers informing marketing ops and the database team in terms of what data they need.
You said that data isn't just a one-and-done kind of task, but how frequently should marketers look at their whole database?
Yeah, Derek, you want to take this one?
I'd love to. Hopefully I can. Yeah, so, the way we work with customers is, we want to do it continuously, obviously. There is a point of diminishing returns, frankly, where there's a cost to doing it, and there's a time and resource cost to going about the process of doing it. Most of our customers tend to do it on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. So that tends to be about where folks land. Quarterly is kind of the outlier, I would say. So it's somewhere between every 1 month to every 3 months kind of exercise, depending on how much of a data cruncher you might be. That's what we see with the customers we work with.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much. And I'm sorry. Go right ahead. This is
I was just going to add that I would agree. That's what we're seeing from our clients as well, and it's it's best embraced as a lifestyle change and not don't think of it as a cleanup that you're doing every month. It's really it's an ongoing effort that you just have to start to ingrain in the culture that's when we see it be the most effective.
Great. Well, thank you again, John and Derek, so much for all that information. It really was helpful, and I hope everyone enjoyed today's broadcast, seminar sponsored by No Prospects. Folks, we truly do value your feedback, so please do fill out our very quick survey listed here in the slide, and keep an eye out for that ebook in your email box. Thanks again to everyone for joining us, and we hope to see you again very soon. Have a great day.